I have the big pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker. It's Nejc Prah, and he's a designer whose tangly maximalist visual tactics take viewers to surreal places. And we love the way his performative, bold works breaks away from what we generally expect from a poster or an identity. And we've had the pleasure to get to know some of the strategies behind his own thinking process over the last few days during his student workshop. Nejc definitely does not think in straight lines. There are many references and ideas stringing together his work, and the things that inspire him aren't from the typical designer's toolbox. Nejc himself is from Slovenia, and he works with a wide range of clients and occasionally teaches at the Academy of Ljubljana. Before starting his own studio in 2019, he worked as an art director at Bloomberg Businessweek in New York. And before that, he earned his MFA at Yale School of Art in 2015. We are very excited to hear more about his work and thinking, so please welcome to the stage, Nejc Prah.
Thank you. What's up? I'm Nejc. Thank you for this cool introduction. This is the first time I'm doing a talk standing up. I was just saying earlier. I hope it's going to work. Yeah. We just did a workshop. They just said it. I hope you saw it outside. If not, you should check it out later, or you can see it tomorrow. Thank you for inviting me. It's my first time in Sweden. So far, I think it's great. I guess this talk has like 2 parts, and I was, in a way, the first part is what I'm interested in. The second part is what I'm doing. I think what I'm interested in and what I'm doing is not always as connected as I would maybe think it is, but that's okay. But I'll just get started. So just a quick introduction. Yeah, I did undergrad in Ljubljana, Slovenia. I did went to grad school to Yale for 2 years in New Haven, Connecticut, in the United States. That's one of the posters I made there, which I'm not going to talk too much about, but for me, grad school was actually really important. It really opened up a lot of, and changed how I think about design and what I do. Maybe I needed this distance from home just to be alone somewhere far away to kind of relax and start doing things that I felt had more energy. And I kept that to this day, I hope so. Yeah, that was my thesis book. And then I moved to New York because Yale is in New Haven. That's 2 hours north, so it's very close. And you get an extra year of visa. And I stayed there for 4 years. For the most part, I worked at the Bloomberg Businessweek. It's a business magazine. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. It was a great job, I must say. I'm not going to say too much about that, but I spent like quite a few years in the field of editorial design. Here's just a couple of examples. Yeah, this one was about Angela Merkel losing power. And I think it was funny because we had an article like this like every 6 months. I think if you work in the news industry, you like start to realize how repetitive everything is. So this was one of the 5 illustrations showing that she's losing power in the span of 2 years. I also did illustrations sometimes, and just editorial typography or whatever. But I think more what I wanted to maybe briefly address or talk about is just how we perceive the world of design, or what we think is usually graphic design, which I think usually I picked a couple things here, like famous designers like Muriel Cooper or Jan Tschihol, or scandals, fake mock-ups of where the posters will be, portfolios, you know, genius drawings on napkins, which turn into $1 million logos, business cards, things like that. And I think like if you look at graphic design as in a broader sense, I think you see that it's something that everyone's doing. It's like just a thing in the world, and I think it's much bigger than just everything that is like the world of professional graphic design. So I think this is like maybe another thing that I'm interested in, which I think is usually called vernacular graphic design. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but that's the one I use. So it's just I haven't really thought about like the correct definition, and also a lot of these things are in Slovenian. That's where I live now, so I mean that's where I'm from. But it doesn't matter. It's not about what it says. I think you all also know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so it's just like design that's done by people who are not professionals, or it's done out of like necessity or need, or something that needs to be done quickly. And I think the more time I spent working as a designer, the more interest I find in things like this. So I think I can later on show you a couple more examples of things like this. So I think, you know, there's a world of professional graphic design, and there's a world of like amateur vernacular design. I think they are largely separated, do not really talk about each other. I think, you know, people who are not designers don't really think about design conferences like this or design awards. They don't, you know, care. And I think we also don't really talk about, or often talk about, design that's done by everyone else. But I guess there is small overlap, which is illustrated here. Yeah, so I mean, I take pictures of this. This one is from Barcelona, where I was a few months ago. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that kind of define vernacular design or amateur design. I think technology being like really the main one of them, meaning that, you know, as a designer, you always think about formats. As a non-designer, you don't think about formats. It's always A4 or, you know, something like that. Or if you're in America, it's a letter size. And, you know, typefaces are not something you choose, but it's, I mean, you just pick what's available in the software. And when the software changes the font, that's how, you know, the visual culture outside changes. You know, I think now with COVID, you would see a lot of signs, at least, I don't know, in Ljubljana, and they were all in Calibri, which is the default typeface in Microsoft Word. But I think if COVID happened in 2006, you know, everything would be in Times New Roman, because that was the default typeface in the most dominant software then. Another thing that I think is super common for vernacular design that I think is interesting is lack of consistency. I think you can see here, it's just like how things are added, and some, you know, are hand drawn, handwritten. Fonts are all different, colors are different. And I think that's really the opposite of what we do. I think like as designers, we're often like really obsessed with, you know, consistency, making, you know, a system, the same type sizes, and there's like a grid and a hierarchy, and things align, and, you know, which I think people here like don't care about too much, and it doesn't, to an extent, doesn't matter. I mean, or it does, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, handwriting as just like something that's faster than when you have to write something and print it out. Maybe that just takes too much time. Maybe someone is just like lazy. Maybe it doesn't matter. That's another thing. I mean, I'm not gonna go through all of them, but yeah, and like, you know, like more specific example is just like stretching fonts, which I think I'll get back to a little bit later. But, you know, that's something that I think before digital software for design became accessible to everyone, like, I don't know, that's 20, 30 years ago, I guess. I don't think it was even possible. Like, no one was doing this in like an analog way, or not, at least not really, you know. But then once the software came and it was possible to just stretch the box, you know, people started doing it. And I mean, especially non-designers who did not care or know about this idea of, you know, keeping the proportions in as they were meant to be by the type designer. and it's just like a device that is used to, you know, fill up space. If the word's too long, you make it shorter. If there's more space up and down, you fill that up, and it works. Yeah, it's a phone number, but I just wanted to show it in reference to our window exhibition, which is pretty much the same thing, but with different fonts. I mean, in format. Yeah, and then another one that I am always into with one letter per paper. This one I'll skip. And like a more advanced version, this is homemade juice by my girlfriend's relatives in a town outside of Ljubljana. And it's just, he makes it in MS Paint. I think he's not at all connected to the world of art or design, but I'm sure you all have examples like this. I don't think this is like, you know, it happens. But I just think it's like really well made. A lot of effort is put into it. Yeah, the juice is great as well. But I will get to homemade food in a little bit as well. Another thing that happens very often, which I'm not sure if you have a problem with that in Sweden or not, is that letters are missing in fonts. I don't know if you see here. It's the C with like the half caron, or like the C with the full caron. I don't know what the exact word is, but that's often missing in fonts. Sometimes it's because people use like just download fonts online, and those fonts do not have complete or big enough character sets. Sometimes it's because the software is just not supporting it, which like in some weird way was also something that was happening on YouTube for like a long time. You can see like on every example here, it's missing. I don't know if that's a browser problem or if that's a YouTube problem, but it's just something that happens. And in Slovenia, it's like in the design world, it's definitely like, I mean, obviously frowned upon and seen like as like something that indicates like a lack of detail or sloppiness, amateurism, and things like that. Here's two more examples. My eye is very well trained to notice things like that, but it's very small here, so you can hear, and here, and here. Yeah, and maybe a couple more concrete examples. This is the one that the lecture is named after for actually no particular reason, but I had to submit something. So there it is. This is a hotel actually really close to my apartment. It's called the Birokrat Hotel. And I mean, actually it does not exist anymore. Now it's called the Hotel Gloria, but the logo is kept for some other business that they have. And I always thought it was so interesting. I mean, I enjoyed the typography of it because it's so blunt, but especially the name to me felt like so out of place in the context of hotels. I think hotels are always, you know, they talk, if you look at hotels, it's always like they have the words, I don't know, you know, plaza, grand, or like luxury, comfort, best, you know, like Best Western or something. They're always trying to upsell, you know, the experience of being there. And I think if you think about those words, you know, like grand or plaza or whatever, you think about, I don't know, like croissants or fresh coffee, all you can eat breakfast, or, you know, fresh bed sheets and like fancy small soap or something. But I feel like the name Birokrat is so like in your face, just like it's like a random 3-star hotel outside of Ljubljana. You know, you come here for some, I don't know, whatever meeting or conference. It's close to the airport. I mean, I think if you're like staying at the Birokrat Hotel, you're not expecting anything other than just like super boring 2-day trip and then back home. Which I think in a way was like really like honest, you know. When you hear about the Birokrat Hotel, you're not thinking about croissants, but more like about, I don't know, like you know, a photocopying or a salad for lunch, or Excel spreadsheets, something like that. Not to mention the logo is like super unusual is the three figures, like businessman, like briefcase, cell phone, let's go, super fast, running. I contacted them a couple times to figure out who made it. They never replied. I don't know, but I think it's like really interesting in some weird way. More honest. I mean, I don't like to use that word too much, but yeah, I think a good example. I don't know. I mean, you know, it's. I think also the definition of vernacular design for me is quite blurry. I don't know if this was done by a designer or not, but it definitely falls out of the field of what we usually think about when we talk about professional graphic design. That's why I put it in that box. Another one, Electro Bochins. Electro mean like it's an electrician. Bochins is just the last name. Is also a logo that I think is really interesting. First, I think it's very different from all the other logos for an electrician. Second, I think it's showing a cat. It's being electrified, which like in some, it's kind of creepy and weird, I think, like an animal in pain or like almost animal torture, but at the same time, it's not like, I think it's funny, you know, I don't feel bad. It's because it's like, I think executed well, it's like showing you what happens if you don't call an electrician, you know, to help you, I don't know, change the light bulb or whatever. And I think just like this approach, which maybe is a little more risky, I think pays off in this case. Yeah, there's I think this is the redesign. This is what it was before. It's quite similar, but yeah, it's like I also maybe this again is not like super vernacular, but the author of this is an architect in Ljubljana, so maybe you know we can put it in that basket as well. Another one, this is a lettering for Radenska. It's a seltzer water from Slovenia. It's one of those things that are like super well known. If you're from like, I think it's one of those things that everyone knows. You know, I'm sure you have products like this in Sweden as well. But what I'm interested in, I mean, first of all, I think typographically, I think it's really strong. Like the way the uppercase R looks, besides all like the rhythm, which is slightly calligraphic, but also quite geometric at the same time. I think it's really interesting. I think it's almost 100 years old now. It was designed by Mirko Bambic back then. But what I think is interesting about this is how it's has like an how it reincarnates, and I think that is something I figured out when I finished Yale and moved to New York. My parents asked me to design labels for, they make like, in their free time, they make like marmalades and like homemade juice, things like that. Or wine, or I don't know, just like a lot of things, like small batches just for friends, but they wanted to have a design. They were like, okay, so we were, you know, paying for your expensive design education, we've supported you, now you have a job, but it's time to pay back, make us these labels, you know? And they said one important thing is that it has to feel like it's homemade. Because this is homemade, you know, we grow the fruit, we make it into a juice, we give it to friends. So that was the point. And, you know, I was like, okay, I'll do it. And the more I was doing it, the more I was thinking about it, the more it felt like it doesn't make any sense, you know, because I think it's like the moment where when a designer gets involved in the process of making homemade food, it doesn't feel like it's homemade food anymore, because it's like, then you have like a designer in marketing and a campaign or something. But I think the point of homemade food is just like the opposite of that. You know, like your mom writes the year of the marmalade was made with a Sharpie, or, you know, just reuses some packaging to put that in. And that's the actual homemade design. And I think that's the case with this bottle, because on the left, that's, you know, the bottle from the store, and it's the same on the picture. Is the same bottle that has wine from my dad. And like, for example, just last week, I was helping. We have a vineyard. I mean, my dad has it, so I was helping him, and he gave me some wine, and it was in this exact bottle, which it usually is in. And I think it's nice because it's like this is the first life of this bottle. It's a seltzer water you buy in a supermarket, and then it has a second life, like a reincarnation when it's being reused, and when it's reused, you always know it's homemade things inside. And so I think that's the like secondary branding of it. So this is what I was telling my parents as well, and they were like not buying it at all. So in the end, I had to make something. I'm not even showing it. It's not bad, but it's more like that top left image is just like what is I think usually perceived as like imitation of homemade food with like these napkins and stuff like that. So it feels a little bit crafty. Yeah. This is another one. This is a carpenter from Krka, a town outside of Ljubljana, where my aunt is from, actually. Yeah, I mean, I think the genre of children's drawings is not super new, and it's been used before, but I think it still works in this case like really well. I also asked them about this logo, and they told me their child drew the picture. But I thought what was nice was like that it's actually like this tree that's like a human being, with a face and feet, and like this scared of its future, like it knows that it'll be chopped into like some furniture really soon. Not to mention the like really strong placement in this truck. So, yeah, another good example, I think. And this is one, I bought this when I was still in the States. I'm sorry, I forgot the name, and I don't have a picture with me. But it's from two guys, I think, from Florida. They publish this really thick books, spiral bound, about plants. I think this is just a really interesting example of vernacular design that's just like really well made, and it's almost like if you would give this book to a designer, it's like there's nothing that needs to be done because it already just works, You could make like some grid or whatever, but in a way it's like really beautiful. And the way they treat images is like really strong. They cut out the backgrounds around all those roots and unified it usually into gray. Here's another example I think is really strong. Yeah, if anyone's interested, I can send you the name of the press. It's something about plants in Florida, but I forgot. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, and also it feels like it just kind of, it's like very straightforward. It almost feels like this is like, how you would do a TOC in, like by default in Word or some other program. Yeah, so I think one thing that is also interesting is how like this, how vernacular design sips back into mainstream design culture, or like just mainstream culture in general. So this is like an example, like we are increasing our discounts, neon color, stretched Helvetica, I think. And I think that's where it starts, And I think then slowly, I think people like designers started using these moves. I think, partly through irony or like through rebellion, but I think a lot of times also just as like a move to like trying to make something that feels like that it's not like corporate or too well designed or like too fancy. And I think when maybe you're like working on a project or making something that you want it to feel different, and like you like intentionally use these moves just to kind of indicate this twist visually, and then slowly it gets kind of like even. Some would say, appropriated, like, or, starts being used. This is like in the middle is an example of a publication called Under the Radar by Spectre Books. And you can see like the credit for the image is the same size as the image, So that's how you kind of have a system of stretching so that it's like mirrored, and then you know which credit is for which image. And I'm showing this because I think it's a really good example of this being used, like not like ironically, I think, or like, but just as a design tool, or like just as a design move, just as the same as you would use an underline or a change of color or like small caps. And at the same time, this publication got the Grand Prix award at the Type Directors Club in Tokyo, which I'm just mentioning because I feel like it's just one of those, it's like it's been validated, you know, by the design community. It's not like that it's on the margins. I mean, yeah. And then the last example is from Spotify, which I'm guessing a lot of you use as an app. You probably remember Spotify Wrapped at the end of the year, where, you know, it goes through your data and tells you what were your most popular artists, songs, albums, and genres. And this year with the genres, they were like using this move of stretching the type. You know, the less relevant it is, the more stretch it gets, which I think is interesting, because Spotify definitely is like one of the, as I see it, like one of the leading design companies. I mean, companies with like leading design in the field. In the tech field, they have a design blog. Like they're really like, I think, pushing this forward. Maybe some of you are in Stockholm. I don't know how it works, but maybe some of you are from there or like know someone who works there. Anyway, so I thought it was really interesting, because this was the first time that I really saw like this move that even like when I started going to school was like, at least in Ljubljana, was like really no one would stretch fonts, and it was really like we didn't even think about it. And now it's like being used by like a mainstream big tech corporation, you know, in like an obvious attempt to try to be cool, which I think they are. But you know, it's not like a criticism. I'm just like thinking out loud, you know. The only thing I think that, you know, gives them away as like being a tech corporation is that they repeat the word after they write it, because it was like, there was a meeting and someone was like, I'm not sure I can read it. And they were like, fuck, we know we're not supposed to, but we have to do it again. And, you know, you don't have a choice. At least that's my experience from working in a corporation. So that's my guess. Yeah. It's another example on the left, Schauspielhaus Zürich, Identity. That's a theater in Switzerland. I think Identity is being made by Lorenz Brunner and his studio. I'm just showing a couple examples, but it's definitely worth checking out. I think it's really strong. And I think even years ago, I think this Identity was done by Cornell Windlin. So my guess is this is a theater with like a strong design history, at least for maybe the past 20 years. And on the right is like a picture from a couple of weeks ago for like discounts for like mulled wine or Gluck wine, I don't know how you call it here. And I think it's obvious how like I think this aesthetic of something like this is like being influenced by like the most basic vernacular move, which is like, what's the craziest color we can find? Okay, it's the neon yellow, it's super cheap. We put black type on it and it works. And I think, I mean, this I think goes much further in exploring that, but I think that's my guess, is coming from there. And I think it's really interesting, because this is like the most lowbrow design thing you can find, and this is like, you know, Switzerland, theater, cool designer, like the best thing, and it's almost like it's going full circle, you know. That's why I'm showing that one. And this, yeah, I just thought this was interesting, because I know this, like, 2-letter emblems have been like a thing in fashion for a long time, at least in high fashion. And then later on, you know, they get like copied by more like lowbrow, cheaper brands that are trying to imitate it. And then like today you have like brands like Balenciaga that are like in like some weird, ironic way, like bringing this back and like imitating not really this, but both of this, you know. So it's at the same time is really expensive and tacky and like kind of a, you know, it's just one of those many indicators how like highbrow and lowbrow cultures have like started to become pushed together or mixed, yeah. Yeah, and then yeah, this is this label that I showed before reminded me of this New York cover from like about a year ago by David Hockney. I'm sure you know David Hockney and his paintings, especially his iPad paintings, and this was one of them. He's done a couple, I think, iPad painting New York covers, but this is the one where a lot of people were like complaining that this is like, you know, I don't know, whatever. I thought it was great, but yeah, I just thought I was put it up here. And this is like the last example I have from this part, I think. Left page is the page from, again, the New Yorker. I don't know if you know the magazine, but they've had this layout for like, I don't know, 100 years. There's minor changes, but in general, it's always been like Caslon in 3-column grid, no pull quotes, you know. And then the right side is a page from the local newspaper in Škoflica, which is a hometown where I'm from. And so I read that when I go visit my parents. And it's funny because that article is about like there's a new basketball hoop in like one village around Škoflica, and I was reading that and I was like, oh wow, that's cool, and also it looks like the New Yorker, you know. And then the left one is, I think actually an article by Barack Obama, the former president, who wrote this super long and complicated piece about how they try to push the Medicare for all or some health thing in the United States when he was still the president. And I mean, I'm not trying to prove anything with this comparison. There's no like, oh, it's the same thing, because it's not, but I just thought it was funny because, you know, it's similar. Yeah. Yeah, so I think now we're doing a quick, you know, that was the first part. I think the second part, I'm going to show a couple of my projects. I try to like make a selection of those that I think relate to what I was talking about before. I think I like look at vernacular design quite a bit. I'm really into it. I'm not so interested in like imitation, but just as like, you know, using those principles of, I don't know, being, sometimes being straightforward, or sometimes just using your hands, or sometimes just being simple or blunt or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, so there's a switch. Yeah, this was an identity for the graphic biennial in Ljubljana, which was curated by Slavs and Tatars, this art collective based in Berlin. It was themed around satire, and I used this identity with this hedgehogs. Because if you look at like old satirical newspapers, like satirical newspapers don't really exist anymore, but like 100 years ago, that was like the, I think the modern equivalent of that is like an Instagram meme page, you know, just like a hub of humor or something. And all of those newspapers in back then in Slovenia were named like the wasp, the hedgehog, the silver thistle, or the, I don't know, the bee, whatever, the snake. So things that, you know, bite, or you have pricks or thorns, or, you know, spikes. So that's where this idea came from. And then the hedgehogs have been used as like this, or maybe overly cartoonish element to show on this like comical sides of satire. And then we had a combination of photos with that shot by Klemen Ilovar, a good friend of mine who's a photographer, to maybe show like the more serious undertones of satire. I mean, I don't think anyone figured that out through this, but that was the idea, and for this contrast. Yeah, but we also made a newspaper, and part of the newspaper were like interviews and just things about some people. And I didn't want to use photography. We didn't have a budget for illustrators, so, or like at least for real illustrators. So I asked a couple of my friends to make the portraits. So this is like, Luka Macic is like a filmmaker from Slovenia. It was drawn by Sean Yandris, a designer from Berlin, and it was published like this. And this was Mr. Bean. It was drawn by my girlfriend. It's here. It actually looks more like the former president of Slovenia, which I forgot to put his picture in, but yeah. And this is Macy by a friend of mine, Diana, which was put here. Yeah. Here's a couple details of the wayfinding and merch and printing and stuff like that. But and also we made a catalog that had some hand lettering for each of the names of the person that was there. And I noticed that each text started with the name of the artist, which was supposed to be, you know, written big. So I realized it doesn't matter so much if you can't read it, because just, you know, start reading here and you'll figure it out. Yeah, and then there's a project that's kind of complicated. I think complicated because there's just like so inconsistent, and I'll try to somehow explain it. So it's a photopub. It's a photography festival. I think right now, I don't know if it's over or if it's just on hold, but it's been a while, since 2019, obviously. So it used to be a photography festival, then it turned into a contemporary art festival. I think everything in the end is contemporary art thing, but yeah, why not? And we used the symbol of an egg to kind of, as like something that repeated every year. The first year was a poster that should be here. I didn't put it in. It was like this cracking egg, and it was like a symbol of, because the photopub, it's been around for like 20 years. This was like just new people took over. Things changed. It was not about documentary photography anymore, but contemporary photography. So it was like a big change. It became like a lot more arty, So the egg was like symbolizing this something new is coming up, something new is starting. And that was the first year, and then the second year was like, oh, what are we doing with this egg now? So we kind of just decided that what if we figure out a way on how to crack this egg in a different way, every year. So that was the identity. And I think the second year we had this chainsaw just as like a symbol of like how it's harder, every year when you do something new for the first year, okay, it's new, but then the second year it's not so fresh anymore, so you need better equipment or tools or whatever. So there was a couple of examples. If it was like actually like a really small thing, if you think it was a poster, it was a catalog, smoking papers, that's it. First year it was just a poster, so this was like a big move. And this is the second one, which is this one. And here, we were thinking, how to connect this festival to the local environment, and we were like, okay, local environment is the Dolenjska region. This was not in Ljubljana, this was in Novo Mesto. And in Dolenjska, there's a lot of homemade wine production. It's funny that I'm mentioning this again. I was not planning, but yeah, so also, anyway, people make wine. I don't know if you've seen this machine before, but instead of the egg, originally, this is a big box here. You put the grapes in, and then you turn this thing, right? This is moving up and down, like complex physics, but it's squeezing the grapes, and then the juice comes out, and out of the juice, you make the wine. So it's like a wine press. So we're like, oh, let's use that as the thing that's trying to crack the egg, which we did, and I made the poster here, and I was like not into it at all. It felt too kitschy or something. So we were like, what if the identity is just about this machine? So every application is using it, but at the same time, it can be super different. So this one I made. Then the middle one was like a big billboard poster that my friend illustrated. It felt like it fits more into the countryside. And then the third one was like a website that was animated, and it was pushing it down, up and down. There's also the portraits, but I think I can mention this later on. And the catalog. There's always there was a lot of space for just freestyling and doing what I was interested in doing. That's why I liked working on this. And then came the next year, and it was again how to crack the egg. And I was thinking, okay, what's specific to this generation? And I was like, oh, it's like, culturally or like in terms of pop culture, I feel like the Harry Potter saga is like the main thing that kind of influenced us from like when we were children. So I wanted to use that. I also felt like it's kind of like frowned upon or like slightly lame to, use Harry Potter in like an art context, which I was intrigued by. So you see the egg, Voldemort, Harry, trying to crack it. And then I made some fan art with pencil. And instead of the scar, with the scars F for photopub. And by the time I was doing this one, this was the 4th edition. was getting so complicated that I made this whole chart explaining how we got from egg to Harry Potter. So it was like this talk, but just on one page. Yeah. And I was always fighting for like, oh, I need 6 pages before we start your content in the catalog, you know. And I think that's if you can afford to do projects for like small budgets, then you can kind of negotiate things like that. I think the more they pay, the less freedom you have. It's a classic one. It's the Voldemort illustration as well. Yeah, that was the. I'm not going to go into it, but I think by now I've explained it already. Yeah, and I bought. This was like I had this period when I was really into. I would work by John Morgan. I don't know if you know John Morgan Studio. He's a really good designer from the UK. Makes beautiful books. Really good typographer. And I noticed he was using this version of that looked this typeface that kind of looked like Times New Roman, but it wasn't Times New Roman. It was like better, you know, or like nicer. And I figured out it's like this Starling. So this was just about the time when I was doing this catalog. I was thinking about that. I'm buying his books. And I was like, okay, I want to use this font as well. So I bought it. And then when I was using it, I realized it doesn't have the ch. You know, it's the thing that I mentioned earlier. You know, super annoying. Because, you know, if you go by the rules, you're not supposed to, I think, just open the font in glyphs and, you know, add that, which is, you know, takes 1 minute. But I think you need to call them and then ask to custom make this, and they'll charge you like crazy. You know, I mean, fair enough, but we just left it. I even made it slightly bigger so that it kind of pops out a little bit more. There's a couple more examples from this catalog, but yeah, we made this illustrations of those. I forgot the name of those monsters in English, but the ones that suck your soul, you know. Yeah, there's the couple, you know, future couple. Okay, it's 20. How are we on time? Are we okay? 15 minutes left? Okay, that should be good. 2018, I think it was, for me, like time to maybe go back to photography. It's a photography festival. I think they were drifting away from photography, and I was like more into it. So I was like, this year should be about vernacular photography, or just like people go on vacation. I don't know if it happens to you when you go on vacation, or like your friend goes somewhere, you know, travel somewhere, and then they come back and they want to show you all these stupid pictures, and you look at those. So I was thinking maybe we do something around that. And so, you know, when you take a picture and you're holding the sun, we were like, that's the moment where you're like squeezing the egg. So that's why the sun is egg-shaped. That was the poster. And then we made this this guide, printed guide that was for all the people who were not from Ljubljana or like not from Slovenia, because of a lot of foreigners. They would come to Novo, this small town, and they didn't know what to do. So this was like, here you can eat. This is the schedule. These are all the exhibitions. This is the map. You know, blah blah blah. And I asked a lot of my friends, can you send me your vacation photos? You know, so this is one from Alex from Greece. I think this one I took. This one's from Clement. That's me on a boat, swimming, sunset. And then I was reading this introductory text for this leaflet, and it was so boring. It's like, since it's reconceptualization, the photo professor, which is led by young artists, aims to recognize, I mean, I'm already, you know, sleeping, so. I mean, and I told this to the team, and they were like, yeah, we get it. This is like the text from like that's the text that you write to get some funding or whatever, you know. So we decided to write a new text, which was like about how to act when you come to Slovenia. And then we folded this thing in a way. So that's the first thing you read. Like, you come there, read this is how you need to act, you know. Which I thought for me was also kind of funny, because I think most people came from Western Europe. And I think, you know, still when you come to some small town in Slovenia, you have some ideas, you know. that was my guess, or like what I thought was funny. Yeah. And then the text, I mean, the photos were kind of overlaid, like kind of over the text. Not really, but, you know, slightly. It's almost like someone's, you know, trying to say something, but you're just pushing your vacation photos over that. We also made the map, which was not super useful, but the town was so small that it kind of felt like, you know, whatever. You'll find it. It's like just 5 streets, so yeah. We made color coding for the events, just like marking, you know, where's free food, which people are like from cool curators you should, you know, hang out with or stuff like that. I marked like the people that I know, things like that. But I'm mostly showing this as just an example of how you can, you know, sometimes take something that's kind of random as like, oh, we need to print a small thing, and you kind of take it more personally and like just make something big out of it, something that's interesting to you, you know. So in a way, you're also just making it for yourself and like inject a lot of these ideas in it, you know. I think I've had a lot of ideas in here that I later on have used in like other bigger projects, you know. From overlapping photos to using friends' photography to just adding this like color coding and yeah. That was the text that I showed it already. Yeah, and then the last one was again we found this machine that cracks an egg for you, and then it was also this egg cracking butt crack connection through language that in the end was just used like and it was like used like a mascot, you know, more like straightforward. Yeah. And then we make a catalog every year. It's always photography by Clement from the installation shots, dynamic typography, backside. Yeah. And that's the portraits, because every year they invited like curators, professors, you know, artists to come and do portfolio reviews, so like young photographers from Slovenia could, you know, show their work and get feedback. And we had to use, the first year they were like, oh, that's the people, that's their photos, and the photos were all like, you know, different. And like I mentioned before, you know, I'm designers, so want consistency, so that didn't work. So I was like, let's make portraits of these people every year, which we started doing. Like first year with crayons, second year with Posca, and then the third year I actually tried to make it feel like actual people, so I would draw them, and then the fourth year just some quick illustrations. Yeah, and this was like from the third year. I think that was the one that was like kind of tricky because a lot of people were like, this is like rude, people are gonna complain, which, you know, I guess is understandable. I was also like, I don't know if I want to do this or not, but in the end I was like, you know what, if they don't like it, they'll say it, and it's fine, but it's just like nothing personal, you know. This catalog was made for an architecture exhibition, 100 years of the architecture school in Ljubljana, front side, back side. I'm not going to go into it too much. It is what it is, you know. But there's a couple spreads here. Yeah, but the one thing I was interested in is that we did interviews. I mean, they did interviews with a lot of people over Zoom, because we were just making this as the pandemic started. So we used these spreads to show them, and just like use screenshots from Zoom to do that. But also, I worked on this project with Ensemble. It's a collective that I'm a part of. It's like a very loose thing where you sometimes work together, but this was one of the projects where we did the exhibition design together and a couple things as well. And we had a group chat for this. And there was a lot of things in that group chat, a lot of images, like sketches that, you know, were just there, you know. It was just a process. Or like we wanted to we proposed it and it didn't work. But we, in the end, were able to convince them to publish all these images on the, you know, backside, the two backsides, and binding, whatever. Anyway, and I mean, I don't think that they gained anything from this, but they also didn't lose anything from having this printed here. And I think for us, it was just nice to have this. Oh, remember when we were working on this project for like way too long? And we have our pictures here and, you know, just everything that was in the group chat. So I think for me, it was like a nice way to kind of incorporate like something that's like, you know, that's for me, this is the catalog. That's what the last 2 through 4 pages, that's what I'm interested in. The rest, we had to do what we wanted, but I always, you know, think it's nice if you were able to, you know, find like one thing in your project that you're like, that's for me, you know. I mean, some people would say that's selfish, but I think it's I mean, even if it is, I think for me, it's important. Yeah, it's a highway in Slovenia on the way to the airport. I don't know if you have those, but we have this blue gradient boards that here you would say like, don't drink and drive or like careful, whatever. I always thought it was like a nice thing, the gradient. So I used it, this was one of the photopub guides, just like a color thing. Super randomly, you know. But then it was funny, a couple years later, actually this summer, I was doing this basketball court mural in Ljubljana. This is Ljubljana. And I don't know if you know Luka Doncic. He's like this, he's a really, really good NBA basketball player. I think he's one of the next big superstars in basketball. And he's from Slovenia, and when this NBA 2K computer game company, they renovate all basketball fields around the world, and when they approached him, hey, we should do a new court together, they were like, oh, we should renovate the one where I grew up, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, they asked me to make the graphics, which we did. It took forever to come up with something that's going to work for him and for me. I mean, for them and for me. I think it's actually like a super, like, you know, that graphic I showed at the beginning with like a very small overlap, that was this project, you know. Everything I was not into or into it took a while, but it worked out. So this was the process of painting, and in the end, the graphic that was chosen was like the same as the one from Photopub and the one that I initially started because of that street sign. And it's 2 number 7s, I mean abstract, because that's his number, that's the final chord. And yeah, I think that's the last one. Stresk Festival, music festival in Ljubljana. It's organized by Radio Student. It's this radio, student radio. It's supposed to be the oldest student radio in Europe, who knows? And Uline is this American online, you know, or like a shop where you buy hardware things, you know. It's just like Bauhaus here, I guess, or I don't know which one you have, Home Depot. And for some reason, I was looking at the earplugs at some point, and you know, it was really interesting that there are so many different ones, and they're like have these crazy colors and color combinations and shapes, and like looks like a little bit like, you know, like a butt plug or like some sex toy, and kind of shortly after, I got this invitation to make this festival, and just wanted to use this as is almost, you know, like blue background and this earplug. So I ordered a bunch of those, and the identity was just kind of made out of that. And I mean, the reason they have these colors is just because you're in a workshop and you put them somewhere. That's the easiest way to find them. And I think the reasons there's so many different shapes is just people have different sized ears, and you know, it's not like a one fits all solution. So, but yeah, it was just, you know, using this color and using this as they were. And I think the earplug and the music festival, I mean, I think at first they were not into it. I thought it was funny because they were like, oh, this is the new band, they're just coming up. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be terrible. It's just a young band, they just started, you know, it's the first concert. I mean, support, of course, you know, but it's not like the best concert. The first one is not the good one, you know. So it's like earplugs, maybe, you know, it's a little less loud or whatever. And they were like, what do you mean? Why are you saying this? But then they were like, oh no, but a lot of people who go to concerts a lot, they use earplugs, you know, because like professional concert goers. And I was like, yeah, exactly, that's what I mean. So it was sold. Yeah. And then it was just, you know, playing with that in different ways. Oh, no, it's not the last one. I have. We have a couple more minutes? I think I can, I mean, this should be a quick one.
Yeah, it has to be quick.
Okay. Yeah, it's posters for music festival, Orange, the symbol, you know. It's experimental music, so didn't want to make anything about music. We're like, Orange is round and like has texture, looks beautiful. If we keep repeating it, people will figure it out, you know, that it is what it is. I work on this with Clement, he's a photographer. But I just wanted to show, like, every time, sometimes when we met, this was when I still lived in New York, and he would come visit. We bought some oranges, and we made like a photo session. And it was like, you know, things that are like really fast, kind of low key, made with like a simple camera or iPhone or whatever. And that was like later on used as like this was like Instagram stories. And then one summer we were road tripping. This was, I think, in Albania. And we kind of did the same thing. We're just, let's just go for a walk. The light looks nice, he said. And then we just took a couple of pictures and, you know, later on turned those into compositions, you know. This was another one of those projects, but we had quite a bit of freedom. Yeah. And, you know, some of them took a lot of time to make. They were like more laborious. And then some of them, Clement didn't have time, so I had to come up with some quick thing. And yeah, each has a belt of typography, always top or always bottom, which is this. But we don't have to spend too much time on that. But it's just like, this is like, it was always like a quick exercise, you know, exercise in style. You always had to say Pretlice, which was the venue. You had to say Coordinate zvuka, so you had like the same words all the time, you know, being repeated week and week after. And I think that is the final one, yeah. Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.
This is really, really exciting. It's question time.
Oh.
Can we also get the online space up here? Yeah, don't run away.
Yeah.
Maybe we should keep your presentation open, actually. I don't know if people would refer to that. Does anyone dare to be the first? We also might have some on the online space already. Nothing yet. He's a club manager, not an electrician. Anyways, one thing that we have been discussing actually after meeting you and also getting to know you a little bit is, yeah, we actually have a question.
All right.
And it's about rules because, I mean, that's also, I guess, the difference between vernacular design and design made by like supposedly professional designers, that one might not know the so-called rules and the other one knows them and chooses to break them. So this idea of breaking rules, and your work definitely breaks rules as well as like what we're all taught to be like the right typographic hierarchy and the right grid. You're definitely challenging some of these things, and like in terms of breaking rules, and then the next thing you do is definitely making up some new ones. Your work has a lot of systems still. So could you talk a little bit about this balance between like finding out which rules are beneficial and will actually push the work forward, and which rules can be limiting and inhibiting, and how to navigate that?
Yeah, I guess.
That's what
I mean, I think that for me, it's the rules that, I think some rules make sense and some rules don't make sense, you know? I think sometimes you work on a book with an editor, and he really wants some picture to be really big, or like thinks it's important, you know, or like, you know, and it's like, okay, or like has these rules, we need to make this big. It's like, okay, I get it, this is important to you, you know, this is something that has to be like that. Or sometimes you're working with the material and the captions are like really important, or like really interesting. And it's like, okay, it makes sense to make those big and they have to be where they are. But then there's other examples where I think it's just like, you know, sometimes captions or footnotes are just like whatever, you know, and it's, you can just, that's when if you really think about it, that's when you can just do whatever you want with those things, you know. It's the same, I think, with like legibility, where it's like, yeah, it has to be legible, but it, you know, I think all of those spreads for like the Photopop catalogs that were like heavily designed and like tweaked, where it's kind of hard to read, that's just the colophons, you know, because it's like, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can read it if you want, it's not illegible, but you don't have to be too careful. While when you have a text by someone who like put a lot of effort into that text and it's like really interesting, you just, you know, typeset it in a way where you follow the, I don't know, rules or something and make it make sense. But I think a lot of times, I think the breaking just comes from this idea that where you feel like this actually doesn't, not that it doesn't matter, but it's like, if I make it visually interesting, it's going to be better than if I just follow this idea that it has to be super strict or something, you know, or legible, or you know, grid is something that it's like, yeah, okay, if you're doing a lexicon or like Slovenian German dictionary, make a grid and have a system, but for most things, it's just like, you know, we don't need that. We're just used to it, I feel like, or like baseline grid, like it's one of those things where it's so satisfying to have everything snap, but you know, at the end of the day, like no one sees that grid, and I think it's like just I mean, not that no one sees it, but I feel like we're overly attached to some of these ideas. Yeah. if that answers the question to some degree.
I think so.
Anyone else? Oh, wow.
Okay.
Choices. I think we'll start down here. Russ, what do you have?
Well, it wasn't about grids, but I just thought you talked about having so much fun with these smaller projects. Do you ever get approached and decide that you're not going to take on something because you think it will be boring, or you're not going to be able to push and have fun? Like, how do you? Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, but I think usually, you know, it's like, I mean, if I have time, I'll take it, you know, because I mean, I do a lot of things that are not so fun. I'm just not showing them, you know, and usually it's just like, it's a classic balance of, you know, how much money you get or how much freedom you get. I mean, not always, but a lot of the times that's how it works. And I think, you know, it's a business, you know, I also want to make some money, you know, so a lot of times I'm just working on one project that I think it's actually started kind of, oh, it's going to be fun, not fun at all, you know, and like first we went from like semi-cool design just down to like, oh my God, you know, but, you know, it is what it is. So I think maybe in the last, I only have my studio for like I mean, studio is just me. So for like 2 years, you know, maybe 2.5 now, almost. So I think only in the last like 6 months or a year, it came to a point where maybe I actually get so much work that I'm starting to say no to things. So I'm a little bit more picky. But at the beginning, you know, you just kind of take everything that you get, yeah. Yeah, but I also actually do get approached quite often, or at least in theory, to like actually, you know, do my own thing, which is like, I think when people are like, oh, this guy has a style, a certain way of working, then they want that. But usually when people become because of that, it doesn't work out. You know, it's always, you would think that it will, but or like they'll be like, oh yeah, do whatever you want, yeah, just do something cool, and then you do something that you want, that you think is cool, and they're like, oh, actually, can you just do this that you've made before, you know? Which is also, I get it, you know, it's like art direction, you know, they want something specific, it's not a problem. But I think I just noticed recently that it's funny how they, it's never like that. It's never like we want this. It's always like, oh, just explore, do something cool. And then it's like, oh, cool, that's great what you did, but now do this. So yeah, it's almost like some weird game. But, yeah. Yeah, I hope that answers.
That was good.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we had one more. You still want to ask your question?
I'm just wondering, what was your experience working with Bloomberg Businessweek?
Oh, it was a great experience. Yeah. It's like it's Bloomberg has this big tower. I don't know if you know Bloomberg, the company. It's like they make software for trading, or like for everyone. If you're in finance or a bank or Wall Street, whatever, you need that software. And they were the first one who figured this out, and they were the first one who made that software, like, I don't know, 40 years ago, some time ago. And they've gotten so good and so big, they have almost no competition. So like if you are in the field, you need that. The subscription is $25,000 or something like that per year. So they make a lot of money. So they're like a big company. They have this big tower in New York, and because this software also covers news. They have news, so like you're in the terminal. That's how it's called. You get all the information you need. Real time, whatever. Also news. So they were like, okay, we have news. Now we want to have like more sophisticated news, like not a daily but a weekly. So Bloomberg Businessweek was like before it was just Businessweek, I think. Yeah, it was bought by the company, I think, to kind of like just cover, like, have like a weekly magazine that has like long form articles that's more like clever, smarter, more analytical, and that was the magazine. And I came in 2015. I think it was like the big redesign with Richard Turley. I don't know if anyone knows that scene, but that happened like a couple years before. And since then it was, I think, design-wise, really strong and really open. And most importantly, I think the editors were like really open to it. It was not. They liked it. They liked what we were doing, and they were like very supportive. And like you would come with the design or illustration that kind of made sense, and they were like, "Oh, that's great. I'll write a headline to that," And they would change it, and then it would work. It happened quite a lot. I think for me that was like a really positive experience, because usually, at least I think it doesn't really work that way. So, in that sense, it was fun. But it was also, that's why I mentioned that tower, because I think the design department of the magazine just really like stood out from everyone else in that building, who were like much more focused in like business or terminal. So it was weird, like being there, being employed by that company. Unusual. But at the same time, yeah, also really good. I think, so paid relatively well, was not super busy. So I had a good time in New York because of that. So yeah, good experience, yeah, I think. Yeah, also it's like the world of business. It's not something I'm interested in, so like you deal with like the content that you sometimes don't even understand. Like a lot of times you do, but there's articles where you just like have to ask the editor like 3 times, can you explain this weird financial concept to me so I can, visualize it somehow. And I thought that would be more like annoying dealing with that, but actually was quite interesting. I think mostly because people who wrote for them were like really good and were able to make these stories, interesting. Yeah.
Cool. I think we have both here, but also from the audience. So let's take one, or for the online audience, let's hear one of those two. Someone says, I have a question. What effect does breaking from the standard rules of design have on the audience viewing a design work?
Well, let me read that again.
Yeah.
What effect does the breaking from the standard rules have on the audience viewing a I don't know. It's gotta ask the audience, That's hard to say. But I think I would say that I don't do it that much, or in a way where it would be too crazy,
But I
Yeah.
think you have seen those designs from non-professionals, the vernacular designs, and you found some kind of fascination with that. So, what is that fascination? Why did that capture your attention?
I don't know. I think it's just you know, because I think the field is so focused on professional design that I think at some point you maybe get, and if you're really into it, I think at some point you get like kind of a little bit tired of it, you know. And then you start looking around, and it's like you see all these small things. They're like, oh, this is cool, you know. All this, everyone's doing it, you know. It's not just me doing it. Everyone's kind of doing design a little bit. And then I think once you get rid of this idea how things should look, I think, or like you just approach it with like more openly, you just see a lot of things that are like actually genuinely interesting or like funny, you know, or just, yeah, I think.
And let's take the question here.
Hi, thank you so much. This was really interesting, and everything you showed was super fun. I'm going to be my least favorite kind of person at a conference who in the Q&A says, I don't have a question, I have a comment. I'm trying to make it into a question, but I just don't know how. But I guess there's just never an explicit mention of class. And I feel like so much of this is about class, because what we consider lowbrow or highbrow is about class. And vernacular design, who ends up making it, who requires it, who ends up being the audience of it, is also about class. And I thought it was really interesting what you said about how vernacular design and like graphic design are going full circle, but in a way that's like always the case where working class aesthetics are co-opted into being more highbrow. I mean, we see it so much also in high fashion, like the way you showed with those logos. And I guess I'm just wondering, maybe this is where I try to formulate a question, is like, what is the self-awareness in graphic design, like graphic design as the professional, capital G, D, graphic designers? What is the self-awareness of how we take those aesthetics and we can afford to be silly, goofy, and we know that the brand already exists and will be identified, or won't struggle with like being illegible or, yeah, silly, goofy. Yeah, so what is how do we continue as graphic designers breaking the rules, knowing that it's kind of easy to break the rules in a way? I don't know.
No, yeah, it's a great question. I mean,
If it's
or a great
question.
comment, yeah. Sorry, you can
More
go
of
on
a
if you want to.
comment. No. Don't let me go on.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's definitely like the question of class here, like this working or like working class aesthetics of all this compared to like the elite world of design. I think about that a lot. I don't have a good answer for that, you know, because I feel like I think it's not always. I think as a designer you can be. It's not always like sometimes it's appropriation, and I think sometimes it's like trying to be like cool or hip or like look, you know, through that. But a lot of times, I think it has like a more honest approach to it, you know. And I think a lot of the things that maybe I was showing is, I mean, don't really want to just make fun of it or like be wrong. I think they just maybe are like expanding that, you know, to some degree. I mean, I don't know. And one thing I think is also that I think that the example I showed with the wine and the Swiss theater, you know, that's like a super highbrow, lowbrow thing. But at the same time, I think the guy who has that bar making wine has more money than the theater, you know. So sometimes I think when this lowbrow aesthetics are appropriated by cultural institutions or like by someone who has like a small publishing, I don't think it's really, you know, maybe it's elitist in like a cultural, like educational sense. You're like highbrow in terms of being like from like a cultured world, but you're not like actually, you're still maybe in a precarious situation, you know, and not like doing so well off. Sometimes, not always, Yeah, but more, I mean, that's actually definitely something that I'm really thinking about it. I intentionally didn't want to talk about it too much in this, because I'm actually doing a broader talk about just the vernacular design. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this is actually is really complicated. And the more I think about it, it's really not about design so much. It's about, just, class and culture and how that is connected. So yeah, I don't have a great answer to you, but and I struggle with it as well. And I think it's almost like a case by case basis, where sometimes it's yeah, that's legit, and other times it's this is just a bad, fake, inauthentic version of it, and which is kind of hard to say. Yeah. I would partly disagree that it's easy breaking the rules. I would say it's no. I mean, I think it's I think it's kind of using these vernacular things in a way that will look good and interesting and be a good piece of design. I think is really hard. Just imitating and mocking that aesthetic, I think it is easy, but just using it and making something that is actually still visually interesting and beautiful and make conceptually strong, I think is super hard. And that's why very few people pull it off in a good way. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't actually mean to say that it's
No.
it is actually very hard to even sell that idea to someone of it should be vernacular design and it should be maybe more fun or different, or the rules should be broken.
Yeah.
I guess I meant it's easy in the way of what I meant affording to break the rules.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
But the work is not easy.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a great insight. Yeah.
Should we do a couple more? Do we have time? Mr. Time Man?
Mr. Time.
Let's take one more from the online audience. It's kind of a classic, but really nice. Who are your design heroes and who do you look up to? I would expand it and say it doesn't have to be within design.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many, I feel like I'm already part of this generation that grew up with, I don't know, at least Tumblr, if nothing else. And it was never one thing that was crazy, There was always a lot of those. I think in the contemporary design scene, I don't really know where to start, but I was definitely influenced by by Dutch design scene. I think also before going to Yale the first year, and then being there, it was a lot of professors from that scene. I think when I saw work from Meta Heaven, I was like, wow, this is to me it was really crazy. It was the first time I was seeing something that was so different from what I saw before, and even was a studio writing their own articles that were not necessarily about design. I thought that was really strong. Wanted to do work like that for a while, then I realized it's not my thing, so you can't do it. So I stopped. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. I'm sorry. I mean, not that I don't know. It's just there's so many things that or so many people. I'm thinking about who I would mention from the world of art, and I don't like. I don't know, I like Fischli and Weiss, but who doesn't like Fischli and Weiss? So, yeah, maybe I'll think about that more, and I'll let you know tomorrow. I'll come back with a list. Yeah.
Thanks. I think that was a really nice segue into our closing remarks.
All right.
Because, of course, from now on, you can come up to Nejc and actually ask him questions that you might have come up with in 15 minutes, or maybe when he thinks about more of his heroes, you can get more of those out of him. Also, yeah, remember the footnote box. If you actually made some footnotes, put them in the yellow box over by the yellow light. Have a drink. There's plenty, so definitely hang around. We're going to put on some music, and yeah. Also, if you have questions to us, if you want a t-shirt, also come to us. And and come back tomorrow. We're going to open the doors at 2, and talk starts at 3. Thank you so much.